Thank you for joining us this afternoon here at CULTIVA, day one, Friday here. My name is James Gunn. I will be moderating this session here, this panel discussion with the title focused on the future of cannabis, the evolution, and looking at sustainability and how we're going to use this plant and utilize this plant to make a greener future in the years ahead. We have an illustrious panel here, so I appreciate everybody who is attending here. And without further ado, we're going to get started. I do want to introduce our panel here. Immediately to my left, we have Elena Yaneva, right? Yeah, correct. So she has begun her work and research here on the topic of hemp-based biocomposites here while studying civil engineering at the TU, the University of Technology here in Vienna. She has initiated a hemp company called Hempstatic, which is a project focused on hemp-based construction materials. We'll hear a lot more about this further on, but as we move forward, in the middle we have Maren Krings, who is a photojournalist from Germany. She's a climate impact storyteller, an author, and a filmmaker. She's been traveling around the world, and she recently published a book, H is for Hemp, which is an encyclopedia of industrial hemp. She has partnered with Hahnemühle, native tongue, so minus the umlaut, paper manufacturer to specifically produce Hahnemühle, yes, to specifically make this book out of hemp paper. We'll hear more about that as we move forward. And then immediately, all the way on my far left, we have Francesco Mirizzi. He is currently responsible for agriculture, bioeconomy, environmental policies with the European Industrial Hemp Association. He has 10 long years of experience working in agri-food policies in Brussels and also has worked in private sector as well. So I appreciate all of your attendance. We'll have a big round of applause for everyone who has just came from all over Europe here. But without further ado, we'll jump into the questions. I guess real quick, anything that I left out on your introduction that you would like me to add or add something for the introduction? This is good? Yeah?
Thank
okay.
you.
Are all these mics working back there? Perfect. Thank you. So sustainability is a hot topic, obviously. It's a word that's thrown around a lot, and it becomes a question of what does sustainability even mean? How do you define sustainability? And so this is just a general question to each of you. How would you define sustainability, and from your perspective? And whoever would like to jump in first, whoever's feeling boldest, feel free. So, but how would you define sustainability, Francesco?
So I would say the possibility of sustaining a business over time when it comes to environment, social, and economic aspects. And indeed, we talk a lot about hemp and sustainability. I believe that the real question is when hemp is really sustainable, because it's a bit like a lot of people say it is sustainable per se, the plant, but actually depends on how you grow it and how you process it. So we are still a small sector, we're growing, and we have to pay a lot of attention to these aspects to make sure that we really develop in a sustainable manner. From an economic, social, and environmental perspective, we have good chances because we are a very useful plant that fits very well with circularity principles, which can help also the growth of local economies, and it's also very good for health. So we kind of check all the cases. So it's a good start, but what I would like to send as a message, let's not take it for granted, the sustainability of hemp. We have to make sure it is really sustainable. And so it's about having the good agroecological practices, make sure that the process is as clean as possible from possible chemicals that might hurt our health, and also to make sure that the people that work around hemp then get benefits, social benefits and economic benefits.
Yeah.
Especially in the rural areas that nowadays in Europe need some kind of revival.
Especially in the rural communities. So
Exactly.
the social benefits, the ecological benefits, also understanding that that there is a economic aspect to
Sure.
it. So, and I think the one thing that you touched on right now is when, and we'll get to that question later. So I like, just a little hint to where we're going. Maren, if you had, how would you define sustainability from your perspective as you've traveled around the globe interviewing people involved in the industry?
I have to say right now I feel it's a bit of a blown up word. Most of the time I get goosebumps when we're starting to talk about sustainability, because you never really know in which direction the conversation is going to go. But to me personally, I think I've come to the point where sustainability is for me a mindset where I have to start seeing myself as part of nature again, because as humans we have that tendency to just totally set us apart from the natural, circularities. And one of the reasons why I think I hung out with that hemp plant for so long, and why I continue walking my path with hemp, is because this plant usually introduces me to people who have they're trying something new. They're trying to find that nature in themselves, and they're trying to re-nature or re-wild themselves with and through this plant by doing ecological clothing or ecological building materials. And tentatively, you don't just stay with this one plant, but you're really trying to seek new, concepts, how to debunk this life where certainly a couple things went wrong, to say it lightly. And I couldn't agree more with you, Francesco, on the topic that there is a tendency to see it too lightly, that hemp automatically combines things to the sustainability, which is definitely not true unless you think it through the entire way. And it's difficult. Doing anything with hemp will cost you a lot of time, a lot of patience, and it's also got to do with this mindset that there is no instant gratification when you want to do things right and natural and biological, to put out all these big words. For me, it cost me about 2 years to develop this hemp paper with a German paper manufacturer, and I was just mentioning that before we went on stage. It was not necessarily one of the most fun rides I experienced in my life, but it was a telling one, and it was a very it left its traces, and so I try to be very careful with this word sustainability.
So what I'm hearing is that to do the good thing, to do the right thing, to develop the hemp-based paper, you had to jump through a lot of hoops and cross a lot of hurdles, because business as usual, it doesn't typically work for sustainability. So it sounds like there's lots of barriers. But at the same time, if you want to get a long-term vision, if you're not looking for the short-term immediate benefit, then you're going to have to invest a little time, money, energy, effort into these things.
Maybe to add one word to
Okay,
that,
but because
I think sustainability really has something to do with embracing it and having fun exploring it.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, and of course the circularity is the concept that we'll be talking about. Also, you touched on this nature-society divide and how we're trying to, kind of become one and understand ourselves as people who are a part of the planet, not against the planet. And speaking with someone who is taking action in the private sector here in Vienna, we have Elena, who is a hemp entrepreneur. And can you tell us more about your product? I think you're holding a little piece of it right here, right?
Right,
Yeah.
yes, very gladly. So in terms of sustainability, I think that it's great that you raised this question as first one, since we are experiencing actually major greenwashing wave, also from, let's say, the big corporate side, and also to leading to a misunderstanding of what really sustainability stands about, and how far have we gotten not into conceptualizing or defining it, but really realizing it. And I have friends who, for example, think that, oh, sustainability, you are in the sustainability area, it must be so easy for you now. Everyone's speaking about it. There's so much funds going into this way. But on the other hand, what we see is actually mostly the reports are getting done, lots of reporting, lots of theoretical work behind how to become sustainable, yet the practical work is still open. And there we need much more hands-on mentality in order to embrace the sustainability. And what we noticed from our business is that we must define the limits, and these limits need to be attached to the planetary boundaries, and we need to set them at the very beginning of defining our business model and how we want to make sustainability economic also. Because there is also the misunderstanding that, you can be sustainable or you can be profitable, right? And we have to overcome that barrier and show that sustainability can bring profit, but not only profit in monetary value, but also profit for the planet, and it will help us to preserve, for example, natural resources. It will help us to decrease the exploitation of such that are finite, for instance, and it will help us to embrace the potential of the bio-based sector and try to establish these new bio-based value chains that pose a real huge potential for establishing sustainability. This would definitely mean to rethink business as usual, as you say, because just changing one incremental thing in your design or in your product without considering the whole value chain doesn't necessarily mean that you have already reached sustainability. And in our case, we have decided to not use any plastics in our products and to consider circularity from the very beginning in material design.
Yeah, and I think that's applaudable and inspiring, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs will be taking note. And I like to say that people like yourself are creating a race to the top by following a different ethic and moral code instead of the predominant way, which is a race to the bottom. And I think it's very important for us to consider these social and planetary boundaries, because we think of sustainability oftentimes about plants, climate change, biodiversity loss, but it also has to do with human sustainability, has to do with good livelihoods, giving people good access to their basic needs. So I appreciate the thoughts here, and quite a diverse set of answers from the European perspective, from the global perspective, from the local entrepreneurial perspective. So one question I have, and whoever's feeling, ambitious, just jump in. You can raise your hand if you like. But what is the story of hemp, and how can our relationship with this plant evolve in the 21st century? Because the 20th century has been, a lot of the story of hemp has been about prohibition, where hemp has become kind of the one. It's become a weed on the side of the road versus a place where a plant that's been utilized for all of its strengths and all of its medicinal capacity. So what is the story of hemp, both past, present, and future? Feel free, anybody who's feeling.
All right, everyone's looking at me.
The storyteller.
I mean, to make it really short, and I think we're at the right venue to keep that short, the history of hemp is a difficult one. Cannabis was amongst one of the first plants to be cultivated alongside with us humans, so we have a really standing long history. I mean, we have cannabinoids in our body, which probably came from somewhere. So, looking back especially at the last 77 years of prohibition, that is something we tend to tell a very Americentric, is that right, the word?
Yeah.
A very Americentric version of the prohibition, which isn't always quite true. I mean, South Africa had its very and much longer route already of prohibition. So there was slavery involved, there was power from people over other people involved in, materializing this plan for purposes such as prohibition. And the fact is that these 77 years are pretty much, almost amounting to a century, which comes to 4 human life cycles, and we have just completely forgot everything. So what you referred to earlier was, we are basically reinventing something that's really old. I mean, I'm saying first hemp paper for a book. No, this was the normal about 100 years back. And now we're coming up with this new stuff that is certainly not new. So this is something where we need to keep in the back of the head. We have to embrace the ancestral knowledge that's still out there, because that will actually accelerate our industries much quicker than we will do by reinventing every single wheel on the plant. And I think you probably have something to say to that.
So it sounds like, relearning what we've forgotten many generations ago and applying this old technology into the future. And go ahead, Francisco, because you work with the European hemp industry, so I'm sure you have some insights.
Maybe talking about the recent acceleration of things, because if we compare the numbers of hectares in Europe today as to those 20 years ago, we see an increase of 6 times. So it's 600% increase of the total hectares of hemp. So
that's a lot.
That's a lot. It's always been there, but it's increasing and keeps increasing. We're kind of on a stale right now because we're around 50,000 hectares since 2018, maybe.
Across the continent.
Across the continent,
wow.
Yes. In Europe, it's not much if you compare to 50 million hectares of cereal crops in Europe, so it's still small, but it can grow. In Europe, we had up to 800,000 hectares before the Second World War, so we have quite some room to develop
some
this crop.
Catching up to do.
Yeah. But if I may, just my very partial experience in the sector, I started working in hemp 3.5 years ago, and I really acknowledge that in a very small time, a lot of people learned a lot about hemp, especially in the European and national institutions and ministries. This is because of all the entrepreneurs and advocates that keep spreading the hemp word, and the H for hemp, and like Maren is an example, or all the entrepreneurs that keep working on hemp. So it has really been, it was quite striking for me when I joined EIHA and we started asking for meetings to the members of the European Parliament. Some of them would not even reply to our emails. And now they're pretty much happy to table amendments in support of hemp. It has been discussed at the Parliament a few weeks ago, the European protein strategy, and we managed to put the word hemp there. Hemp was acknowledged in the draft report as a sustainable source of protein. So I guess that is kind of one example of that, how things can change in a few years.
Yeah, with regulations changing, and more action politically being taken on the European level, being taken on the national level, and I think there's some bright lights on the horizon. Also, as you said, building coalitions, sharing knowledge,
Precisely.
and increasing advocacy. I think this is important. Elena, did you have anything from your perspective as a building material? What is the story of hemp, and where do you see it in the 21st century?
Sure. So as it was mentioned, hemp is one of the very oldest of domesticated and economic plants, and people have been using it since the beginning of the agricultural revolution. And this is because hemp actually offers these multiple application usages, right?
Yeah.
Sure. Here we have some hemp stalks, as we were talking about on the topic of construction, but one can use the stalks, one can use the leaves, the seeds, the flowers, and this is possible only with one single plant.
Yeah.
And this is something that we have to relearn currently, because we heard the numbers, right? We are now kind of in the very beginning, although the story has started few thousand years ago.
Yeah.
And from our knowledge, one of the oldest buildings standing where there have been found hemp fibers and also sheaves is placed in Japan. Miyasamura is the name of the house.
Wow.
And I think it was built in 1698. And we have read also a very interesting article about the Maharashtra, about the Ellora case in Maharashtra, India, where they were built these sculptures, I think 5,000 to 6,000 years ago. And scientists found that the sculptures of the caves were built with clay plus hemp sheaf plus hemp fiber. So this usage has been known for thousands of years, and yet here standing, we realize how much awareness building work we actually have to deliver until we are able to place these products on the novel market. How much standardization and certification needs to be done in order to achieve that acceptance and in order to erase the short history that has been created through the prohibition and through the generations that did not have that touch with hemp as we do now.
Yeah.
For example, in Austria, we have hemp growing since, or being back to a better legal status since 1998.
Yeah.
So it's barely 30 years.
Very, that's very young.
Right.
Yeah, and you were going to say?
Yes.
Okay, I was just, I mean, like, I think what's interesting is that you all touched on this, the fact that it has been an integral part of human society for tens of thousands of years, and that this great forgetting, this 4 generations of prohibition, has really kind of wiped out this knowledge base of ancestral knowledge, of indigenous knowledge, of folk knowledge, and so now we're really having to scramble. And you made a good point there, Elena, that it is a zero waste product. There's so many different uses for this plant, whether it's fiber, whether it's medicine, whether it's medicinal, recreational use, whatever. So I guess getting back to the sustainability aspect, climate change, climate crisis, that's on everybody's mind. How can you envision hemp playing a role towards solving the climate crisis? And since you have the mic, we'll just go ahead and let you go with it.
Sure, gladly. Thank you for that question. So this is part of our vision in Hempstatic and what we try to achieve. So it's not only about creating a product, it's really about creating the whole bio-based value chain behind it and how this product would function at scale. Because I think that the way to achieve sustainability is to be able to ensure some kind of a scale. It can be on a local basis or it can be on European basis, international basis, etc. But this is definitely important, and how to make sure, coming back to Francesco's point from the very beginning, how to make sure that we do it in a sustainable manner. So I think that tracking emissions, tracking the sustainability aspects of the business or of the organization that is striving to achieve that goal is super important in order to understand what is the actual impact. Having biocultivation, this is what we hear also from Austria. Also, although it is a very small market, we have mostly bio hemp being grown here, and this is for the fact that it actually is by nature a low maintenance plant. So this is also what farmers say as a big advantage of it, that they just come to the field to sow the seeds and then they come back to harvest it. And
they call it weed for a reason. The thing is, you don't need to put weed killer on it to kill it. It just lives, right?
Exactly.
So it's very easy to become bio-certified because you don't need to put a lot of fertilizer on. You don't need to put a lot of pesticides on. And I think it's really interesting when you say scaling up these businesses, because a lot of our business structures aren't sustainable in the first place. So it's not like just taking out one part and replacing it and all of a sudden you're bright green. No, it requires a mindset where we have to look at every aspect of the business, not just profitability. Again, getting back to the social and eco standpoint. Francisco, you seem like you've got something
Actually,
to add.
Getting back to the question solving, I'm not sure that we will ever be able to solve the climate crisis because we might end up
playing a role. It's not.
Sure. But I do believe that hemp, what can hemp do is to force us look at things in a different perspective. What has been mentioned before, a more holistic approach to reality and in general to economy, and also it can help us achieve a different type of economic model in different sectors, starting from the building sector, but also the textile sector. So a lot of politicians are saying that fast fashion is out of fashion. I hope so, but it's nice, but you still have to bring back the capability to produce long-standing, like products that can last for longer. Durable products here in Europe. So, and hemp is a fiber crop that can be grown everywhere in Europe. Yeah. And so in this way, it can lead the way to a new economic model where we rely much more on local resources and where we care more about the land and about the communities and about the soil and the environment in general. So I believe hemp can really play that pivotal role.
I think it has this regenerative aspect, and as you say, bringing things onto a local scale shortens supply chains, so things don't need to be transported around the world so many times. And when you look at the way supply chains are built these days, from pulling out some oil in the ground in the Arctic, pumping it over to China to make a poly fabric, and then sewing it into a fleece that ends up in the trash. This is the sort of linear model of economics that's driving us into the ground, and we have to consider the circularity and most importantly, how we can incorporate this valuable plant into our everyday use, whether it's medicine, whether it's food stuff, or fabric. Go ahead, Maren, if you had something to add about the role and sustainability.
Yeah, I'd like to actually open up a little bit also for international, because if we stay very focused in Europe, I think we already have quite a lot figured out when it comes down to the industrial hemp scene, even though there's a long way to go, but this plant definitely forces us to rethink. You just mentioned that whole circularity in terms of staying local with products. What kind of ticks me off every now and then is that when I sort of swarm out on my travels and I talk to people and then they tell me, oh yeah, we're producing the hemp chives and then we're transporting them from A to Z into complete different countries, and I'm thinking like, why are you doing that? Why are you not staying local with your products? Because the real thing with hemp is that it has a lot of biomass. If you start shipping that stuff all over the place, I mean, you have huge loads of trucks, but you really don't have much of a filling. And I want to get really real with a real life example. I just came back from Ukraine a couple weeks ago.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, this plant has actually sent me on a couple of missions that I didn't see coming 8 years ago or 7 years ago when I started this project. So Ukraine was primarily for the mission of basically investigating if there is a possibility of doing a green recovery after the war, which, there's no destruction happening in a war where people will not immediately start rebuilding, because you're not going to live through the next winter if you only have 1 or 2 walls, to be very blunt about that. And there is a very, very thriving industrial hemp community, and it took me all the way of driving into Ukraine to figure out that's when we're talking about Russia in the past, all of this hemp that was grown on the Soviet terrain, which today would be Russia, was actually coming from Ukraine. That's where the roots of the hemp agriculture were laying. And people have that old knowledge, like a lot of these things that we're struggling with here in Central Europe, that, how to do field retting, when's the right moment to get the fields off. We have Ursula Mock sitting back here, and I'm sure as a textile designer with hemp, she knows more than well that the retting process, yes, Ursula, show us who you are. It's so vital, like there is no good textile from hemp if you don't get the field-retted stuff off the field just in the right time. But we have lost that knowledge. And in Ukraine, I've seen a great emergence of hemp coming back for people deliberately thinking about actually rebuilding. And I think this is a big clap to you, because you're in probably one of the most promising industry sectors in hemp, because it's not just carbon neutral, it's negative.
Sequestering.
We're sequestering more carbon out of the atmosphere when we're building with hempcrete than, and we're talking about the moment we put the seed into the ground all the way to the finished building, and it's still, that's an average, and please don't quote me because this happened, depending on how high the hemp grows and where you grow it and how far you had to transport it, but on average, from an Italian study, it was a minus 90% a negative account of CO2. And that's, the number of people on this earth is growing, so we will continue to build, and we will build more. And if we were to just switch that mandatory in all countries to hemp, which can be grown local, used local, that would be such a huge carbon sequestrator where we do not have to go in with geoengineering and all these crazy and fancy methods.
Yeah, I mean, I think you summed it up well. The solutions aren't in the sky. The solutions are on the ground right here and now, and actually they're staring us right in the face. Like this plant is staring me right in the face as we're talking about it. And it's going to require some fresh minds that can tap knowledge that has been, as you said, it's been lost for many generations, but at the same time, smart people who can recognize an opportunity, notice that there are entrepreneurial ways to not only start a business, take ownership of a product, but then help society move forward, and with the knowledge that we have and the numbers, when you're looking at using something like this, may I hold it? This thing. Something like this versus concrete, the amount of concrete, the amount of sand that is being dug up around the world is mind-blowing. It gets transferred all around the world to make concrete. And here you have a building material, and whether it's clothing, whether it's medicine or food, there's just so many ways in which this plant can be utilized.
May I just
sure.
Short point regarding this, because we have had also interesting talks with entrepreneurs who want to jump in that field, and you're absolutely right. Now the most interest actually comes from the construction industry, and we know that the textile industry is currently very risk averse when it comes to the bigger scale, because the machinery is not yet adjusted for this specific application, and this is the very same problem also running in the construction sector. And we have had talks with entrepreneurs wanting to jump into that field, but with these big eyes of, in 2-3 years that's going to be a runner and I'm going to make the millions out of it. But this is actually not how it will run, and not what the end goal should be. And I share that this end goal must be not about the product per se, but about how this product will be embedded in this impact model, in this business model. How will it secure a sustainable scaling and reach really to that goal of making hemp the sustainable choice. And it's not about hemp as the one making hemp the one single choice, but allowing it to expose its perspectives and its potential, allowing investments to flow into the sector in order to catch up on the innovation spectrum that we lost through the prohibition, through the years that we have not been doing actually any R&D on that matter. And we have hempcrete only since the 1984 starting to be part and focus of the scientific fields in France. Here in Austria, we actually initiated that field. There was no ongoing research on this topic. And we have had very interesting discussions also with big corporates from whom we were actually seeking investment. And then we hear answers like, no, wood will be the thing, or this will be the thing, or, our material is already becoming recyclable. So what are you trying to do? The problems are already solved. And this is the point that I just want to make, that it's about allowing this solution to embrace its potential and looking into the perspective, but I think that it will be part of the whole vision of becoming sustainable.
Yeah, I mean, and I think, as I said earlier, I think your story is very inspiring, but it is a lesson to future entrepreneurs that, that because there are a lot, and this kind of goes into my next question, because there are a lot of barriers with the political economic system, with the 4 generations of prohibition in the Western world, the fact that this is an ancestral product, there have been some social justice issues related to the prohibition, and there, it has the law has criminalized the plant that has so many uses. So therefore, there are a significant amount of barriers for people like you who are trying to start this holistically sustainable product, and so it's not a get-rich-quick scheme by any measure. It seems like you really have to have your heart and mind and soul in this endeavor in order to deal with the barriers. Now, real quick, what are some of the major barriers that presently exist towards mass adoption, both like globally, European, or even here in the Austrian Viennese context. And Francisco, I could see that you're...
If I can give like a more encouraging words also to the investors, I believe that there are less and less barriers in the hemp sector today. For sure, from a regulatory standpoint, we need to maybe sort some things out, for example, to ease up the controls on the field. But otherwise, when it comes to the hemp bioeconomy, maybe the only barrier is that we need investors to come and to pitch in and to put some good money to build decortication facilities, catching lines that can then produce raw material. So for me, the biggest barrier today is the fact that investors are kind of not as rapid, as fast as I would expect them to be. There might be different reasons, maybe because some of them, they already have the technologies and they're waiting for the market to be ready to put those products on the market. But we have already seen in the construction sector, for example, big companies from France, Germany, Italy, producing already hemp-based construction products.
Yeah.
In the textile sector, they are looking at hemp as an alternative or complement to flax linen. So I would say that maybe they're waiting for the right moment. So if we're wishing for like a boom, like a huge development in the coming years, it might take maybe 5 to 10 years, but it will come. I'm pretty confident.
Just like anything, like Oppenheimer needed to find that critical mass.
Sure, and also when it comes to technologies, there's a lot going on. There are so many research projects that are conducted around Europe in university and by private centers today. Machineries as well, it has mentioned, maybe some of them are lacking, but this year for the second time actually, the second season, they tested new agricultural machineries for the long fiber production. So we also, when it comes to agricultural machineries, we are sorting things out. So
and I've even
less and less barriers, I would say.
I've even seen it hemp is being used for 3D printing filament.
Sure.
It's being synthesized into filament for 3D printing. So like different ways to utilize this plant, like with utilizing 21st century technology. So bringing this old technology and merging it with the new technology. Maren, from your perspective, what are some of your major barriers that you've encountered towards the mass adoption of hemp globally or even locally?
I want to say, tackling it from more the journalistic side, I want to make a little sort of allusion to something else. We have a very strong tendency nowadays to wanting to have easy stories that are quick to sell and to understand. So it's like all about instant gratification. And this plant just really doesn't work with this instant gratification issue. I mean, there is a reason why it grows almost in all continents and all geography. I've seen hemp grow in Finland, I've seen it grow in Iceland, I've seen it grow in Morocco, in Pakistan. It's so diverse, and obviously this is not always the same kind of hemp. I've seen hemp in Turkey where I was standing under a forest of 8-meter high plants, and I couldn't believe that these were trees. And then when you go to Iceland, you see very small, not any higher than this, and they're really sturdy plants that can withstand the wind. So you got to think different in the sense that it's very, very adaptable. So the things that you can do with the plant at the end will also differ, and you would be doing wisely to also look at what you got and then take into consideration what makes most sense, like when do I use it for building material or textile. This is again for me such a practical thing. Like we keep talking in Europe about we need to build up the textile hemp industry. Well, we just, the genetics in Central Europe, they're not really the ones that you would want to use for the textile, and plus we're missing a lot of the just technical knowledge for the textile. But then when you go to Turkey or you go to Portugal, Turkey has the physical knowledge of working with a fiber hemp because there's still extracting the golden long fiber by hand. Or you go to Portugal, which has a long history in a commercial textile lane.
Yeah.
And it's phenomenal to see that one individual started building up a local supply chain of hemp textiles in Portugal. I mean, you can just send her energy because that's a really long and arduous path. But it's just, think local and take the global thing into consideration. And then it's Ukraine, for example, we had that thing that it's still considered, there's no differentiation between cannabis and hemp. So it's all medical. You have to get a medical license to grow your industrial hemp for building.
Yeah, so there are some regulatory boundaries. But it's important to remember, as you said, that it is a very adaptive plant, just like humans are very adaptable. We've colonized 6, 7 continents on the globe. Maybe there's hemp on Antarctica, I don't know about that, but let's just say there are definitely some barriers that we've created. And did you have anything to add, like as starting a hemp business here in Vienna, what are some of your major barriers that you've encountered presently towards the mass adoption?
I think that it will take some time until we reach that mass adoption because of even the need to increase the hectares, the acreage of hemp being grown in Europe, as we heard in the beginning of the discussion.
Yeah.
But I can totally agree with what was said, that these boundaries are getting fewer yet on maybe a regional level. So I would say that different barriers exist in different regions. For example, I can share some experience from Bulgaria, where I come from, where we have a huge misconception in the legislature. And due to the instability of the government and the constant change of the governments that we have experienced in the last 2 years, we have been going to vote 5 times for parliamentary elections. So there is nobody that now would really focus on the topic of improving that legislature, yet it allows for hemp to be grown, but it doesn't allow for hemp to be processed. So I think that there are different barriers in the different regions, and one needs to look back at also what Maren said and just try to take the best practices existing from other countries and try to adopt them regionally.
So it sounds like there's some economic, some political, some cultural barriers, both internally and as a community, globally, towards the mass adoption. But when we're getting to my next and final question before we open a Q&A for anybody in the audience, we will have some time for that. But we've been talking about the barriers. What are some of the bright lights? What are some of the success stories? Maren, you were touching on some of those. So just if you have a few additional ones as you've traveled around the globe for these past years, what are some of the bright lights in this? I mean, as these bright lights are shining on us.
Certainly, the Ukraine thing inspired me incredibly. It's certainly also a long way until they will be at the point where they can rebuild their nation with hemp. Very questionable if that will be able to be done at large scale. But the fact that people will turn first to hemp because that's the building material that they have available. And another big sort of star in the night sky for me in the hemp world is phytoremediation. There's a project in South Africa where they are actually starting to clean the lead-up gold mines from uranium and
toxic waste and stuff like that.
All like uranium is one of the byproducts coming out of the ground when you're doing gold mining. You have all the heavy metals, and this plant has so much potential to be working on that because it really loves all of these toxins. The only thing that we also have to work in our sense is to kind of think along with a plant and then say, okay, if it's been used for phytoremediation, and sorry to say that, but this plant also phytoremediates when you might not want it to be. So if you're growing it for food and you're not really taking care of where you're growing it, on what soils, and how these soils are constituent, then this might backfire on you.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, we have to be considerate of how we use the plant, where we're utilizing it for, what we're utilizing it for, and under what conditions.
Right.
So Francesco, did you have anything to add? I'm sorry, we do want to leave some time for the audience.
Yeah, maybe I would like to highlight how much work has also been done by the academia.
Yes.
There's a lot of projects going on that work on research and development of new technologies, new methods of production, of fiber treatment, and it's crazy how I would dare to say that at least half of the European universities, they do research on hemp. We have our scientific committee, we have at least 40 universities across mostly Europe and the world, but and they're doing so many things, and if we could only collaborate a bit more and share a bit more, because this might also be another barrier to the development of the sector, the fact that many companies are reluctant to share their knowledge. So if we could collaborate a bit more, share,
clustering.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That would facilitate pretty much the development of hemp.
And Elena, did you have any success stories or bright lights that you envisioned for the future, that you really, some wins that you want to celebrate recently in this beautiful world of hemp?
Well, sure. I think that Poland is a great example in what they're doing.
Poland.
And
Wow.
how they're developing their industry, how they're embedding hemp into the educational system also. So there is a lot of ongoing, and I just recently I read a very interesting post on social media and learned that the Polish word for October equals to herd.
Wow.
Which is very interesting. So it retrospects to the story of actually October is the harvest month, the month of the herd.
Yeah.
So I find that a very interesting and bright example. And actually I also wanted to finish on a more general note and to touch upon what Francesco said in the end, because collaboration is the key in this. And the people that are on the field, that are hands-on, these are the people that we need to take collaborative approach with. It's not just about closing yourself in the lab or trying to, depict yourself as I am the one, who invented this or that, but it's about figuring out ways how to support each other in order to enable for this bioeconomy to flourish regionally and then scale, enable
so
scale.
more cooperation versus competition, more knowledge sharing versus proprietary, keeping it behind closed doors, correct?
Exactly. And here I want to also point out that the work that the European Industrial Hemp Association is super important exactly on, in this topic, because it enables access to, to work to be done that without it just could not be. The hemp's voice would not be heard without
Yeah,
it. So.
I mean, it requires collaboration between people on the ground, people on the policy level, and people around the world who are telling the stories about how this plant has a transformative potential. And as you said, this is the harvest time, the herbst, this is ancestral knowledge, as you said, from the word in Poland. And now we're going to open the floor up to the audience. I see a few hands, and the blue checkered shirt was first, and then we've got this gentleman right up here. And feel free, we've got a few minutes, so feel free to ask the panel.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Ilya Reznik. I am a director of International Association of Medicinal Cannabis, and I'm the next lecturer after your panel. So my question is about the sustainable evolution of cannabis for medical purposes. Currently, there is a strong tendency to develop so-called bioreactors that supposed to displace the harvesting for medicinal cannabis industry. This is my first question, and the second question is to Elena about cannabis in Bulgaria, medical cannabis, etc. So first question is, what do you think about displacing harvesting by bioreactors? And another about Bulgaria. Thank you.
So the first, we didn't have a monitor up here. So the first question would be, the second question was specifically regarding Bulgaria and the medical industry. Did you have any more? Did you have any more insights into that? Sorry, we don't have a monitor. We can't hear anything.
Sure, I will start then with the second question. So yes, we have companies in Bulgaria who have been trying to innovate that field in order to be able to comply with consistent EU regulations. For example, one of the companies, it's called Pobelch Gle. I know it's a very complicated name, it's related to the region, but they started working with CBD products by trying to reach for 0.0% THC. Yet, as mentioned before, the problem is in the legislature, and this legislature is not really becoming a daily topic in the parliament in order to enable more research to be done. But I know that the Bulgarian Academy of Science is working in that field, yet it's a little bit intransparent, or I cannot exactly recommend some projects, and we have very, very few hectares of hemp, of industrial hemp currently, unfortunately.
And one more time, your first question, because okay, you got it?
Maybe I got the question. So it's basically how do we deal with the competition coming from synthetic cannabinoids? No, that was not that one. Okay.
Synthetic cannabinoids, of course, but currently there is no competition because synthetic THC, is it dronabinol or marinol, does not have any market. So it's just unuseful. But a competition could come from bioreactors, biological reactors that could be grown by they are growing only trichomes with precluded features that we can predict. So, and this is what is highly demandable for medicinal cannabis industry.
I understood, yes. So, which is a bit of this kind of the same competition as with synthetic cannabinoids. I can speak on behalf of the CBD for food applications, not for medical, but it's a bit of the same. So if we really want to extract in a sustainable way the cannabinoids from the plant, I guess the first thing we have to do is to assess whether or not what that process is sustainable. So first of all, we need to compare the two. So I don't know. There are many things that should be taken into account when it comes to sustainability. How do we assess it? How much energy is needed for the production? Is it easier to extract cannabinoids from plants in a greenhouse or to produce them in a bioreactor? I guess it also depends on what type of cannabinoids. So I would say it really depends on the final application.
Oh, I guess it's one of those situations.
But surely from an economic standpoint, it would be better if like a small company could benefit from hemp growing in greenhouses then.
Go ahead.
I want to ask, there's some kind of black market or illegal market in Europe, and when I tried to live in Netherlands or Spain, there's always a legal way to get the product and an illegal way to get the product. And most of the time, the illegal product is way cheaper. How can we change that the legal product is more going into the market and the illegal stuff is growing less? Or less?
Yeah, I think
So,
that is recreational cannabis, not industrial hemp. So
yeah, you're speaking about recreational cannabis, or just hemp in general, or hemp in general?
I'm not quite sure if this answer is going to help you, but I was doing a road trip to Portugal and Spain, and I kind of had a feeling I stumbled a little bit up on what you're addressing. And I had insiders who were trying to explain it with me that there's a very, very strong pharma industry in Spain, which certain medications could be replaced with, you know, however you're continuing to develop hemp, industrial hemp, the flowers in labs. And there was quite some, like, it's not a very satisfactory answer, but I know what you've heard, and I think one of the main keys is that we need to continue education on industrial hemp, because there's so many missing links between cannabis, industrial hemp, and then also the fact that we're still at one point talking about one plant when it comes down to all of them, that this whole sliding black markets are probably going to be hard to take care of.
I can just speak to this in my experience. I lived in Alaska where recreational cannabis is legal, and I did work in the industry aside from working in sustainability. And I can say that oftentimes the regulatory framework, the tax framework that is in place becomes very burdensome for businesses that are operating in the light. And businesses that are operating in the dark don't have to don't have to deal with the regulatory framework, don't have to deal with the tax burden, and therefore they're taking a risk. There is a risk there. As we look to try to mainstream this industry, I think it's important for lobbyists, lawmakers, policymakers to take that into consideration. We don't want to tax the legal businesses out of business. We want to set appropriate levels of regulation and appropriate levels of taxation that allows it to come into the light so that the black market will see the light, and we can mainstream this and make it easier for everyone to access, not just calling your guy in the middle of the night. So thank you for everybody here who's joined us. Big round of applause to our speakers from the different perspectives, and thank you so much for attending CULTIVA, and enjoy the rest of the afternoon. Thank you.